Ready.
Good morning once more and welcome to Freedom Square. As Freedom Square comes to you every Saturday, 10 a.m. to 12 noon, and we are reaching you from 100.9 FM, 10B Savage Crescent, GRA Enugu. And don't forget that this is a village square. Of course, if you grew up in the village, you know that perhaps every weekend families, communities will gather at the village square and have a conversation around development, cultural issues, social issues. And that's exactly what we have just brought to the radio and to online social media. So every Saturday we have this conversation where we discuss Nigeria and the world. And of course, this morning I wish to formally say good morning to Nigeria, good morning Africa, and good morning to our listeners across the world. Of course, this is what we are live, the program where ideas are interrogated, so to speak, policies are examined, and the future of Nigeria and the world is discussed without fear or favor. My name is still Uchenna Serela, and I'm still your host. So this morning we're going to have a conversation around globalization and public health, a focus on Sub-Saharan Africa. In an interconnected world where diseases cross borders faster than policies, where global trade, migration, climate change, and technology shape health outcomes, the question is no longer whether globalization affects public health, but how, who benefits, and who is left behind. To help us unpack this, if you don't know the length and breadth we've traveled, we'll cross seas, the oceans, deserts to bring our guests. Our guest is actually a Nigerian, but he has achieved so much internationally. When time comes, I would like him to properly introduce himself in the manner that he wished to. But what I need to understand is that our guest is an authority in global health governance, international law, and development with deep insights into Africa's public health challenges within the global system. He is a professor of law, of international law, but currently is the director, Mahatma Gandhi Institute of Education for Peace and Sustainable Development. He's actually based in New Delhi, India, and of course from there he oversees a lot of the Asian areas, the world, and all that. So he's Professor Obijiofo Agina. Prof, yeah, enough.
Thank you very much.
I don't know how long the last time you were here. You were in this part of the world.
Well, just a year ago.
A year ago,
Yeah,
okay.
I was
You're a yearly visitor.
sometimes 6 months later.
Okay, because you just knew a lot of people when we posted the flyer, we saying Prof. And you see what happened here now?
Yes,
Just a younger colleague of yours
yes.
just saw your face and said it must be arguing, and he was damn right. So those listening to us and those who are actually watching us online, we want to know more about you. So who is Professor Obijiofo Agina?
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Ayoke, for arranging this. I'm very grateful to the management of Solid 100.9 FM for arranging this just within a very short time. I came into Enugu 2 days ago, and the rapidity of your requests, is very encouraging. I'm Obi again. I'm Nigerian, like you said in the intro. I'm from Anambra State. I grew up in my village, in Anambra State, and I studied at University of Nigeria, Enugu campus. I got a law degree and practiced law in Lagos, for a couple of years, and then went to Canada to study. So I attended Queen's University, for my Master of Laws, and University of British Columbia for my PhD. And after that, I was very privileged, in fact, before I finished my PhD, when the former Prime Minister of Norway, Dr. Gro Harlem Brundtland, was appointed the Director General of the World Health Organization. So she brought some innovation, to WHO because she wanted to bring in young people to help, to do some of the shaping, shaping the policies and the thinking of global health policies. So she created what was called the Global Health Leadership Program that was supposed to attract these young people to WHO for a 2-year placement. So then I was a PhD student in Canada, and I had applied for that. And 6 of us were selected from a pool of, I don't know, thousands. So it was just luck and providence. So that's how I got into. Then I was doing my PhD on international law and global health governance. So that was the attraction. So I went to Geneva, and the first opportunity I got to work at WHO headquarters was with one of the most renowned epidemiologists, from Europe, Johan Gizeki from Karolinska Institute in Sweden. So he was brought to WHO to revise what we now know as the international health regulations. And these are a set of regulations that all the WHO 194 member states use, to regulate cross-border movements of goods and services during pandemics. So I was placed in that unit to work with him, working with a team of epidemiologists and doctors and health professionals. Was quite a very good experience because I brought the legal knowledge, I brought the regulatory knowledge, and we worked from 1999 to 2001 to revise those regulations. And so we finished our assignments, and the World Health Assembly, which is a body that is composed of all the health ministers of member states, was supposed to adopt it, and I went back to Canada. I started teaching at Carleton University from 2001 to 2007. So something interesting happened. The SARS outbreak in 2003. Because we've done the revision of the regulations, but the member states were kind of taking their time. International policies, so there's always a lot of time wasted in adopting these policies. And then SARS happened, okay, and it was a terrifying thing for the world, then, before we got to COVID and all of this. Yeah. So what they did was they went and dusted what we've done, the international health regulations, and adopted it immediately, giving the WHO some powers, to use during the pandemics. Most importantly, the most important innovation in the 2003, revised regulations was the fact that when something happens in one part of the world, because of state sovereignty, okay, sometimes the states have an obligation to report it to WHO. They don't, and WHO has no way of enforcing them to do that. Okay, so we now put in a provision there that WHO can make use of informal, information from informal sources. You don't have to wait for a country or the health ministry to report that, because when there's an outbreak in a globalized world, you see it on CNN, you see it everywhere. So you can pick that information and, quote unquote, confront that country to confirm or deny this. Otherwise, you put in place standing measures. So anyway, so from Carleton University in 2007, I got another opportunity to join the UN. This time to join the United Nations University, the UNU headquarters in Japan, which is the think tank for the UN system. So they do the thinking for the UN on a range of issues, and whatever is within the UN mandate is also within the mandate of the UN University, because it was set up to actually make the UN better. Okay, if there are things UN is doing, you can actually do research and advise the secretary.
Is that the only university they have?
That's the only one.
In Japan.
Yeah. Oh, in Japan?
The UN is in Japan.
It's in Japan. That's the headquarters. Okay. But it has 14 institutes. UNU has 14 institutes in 12 countries. Okay. There are 2 in Germany.
Anyone in Africa?
One in Ghana.
Ghana.
There's one in Ghana, yeah.
So Ghana is beating us.
The UNU Institute for Natural Resources in Africa is in Ghana.
Okay.
So anyway, so 6 years in Japan with the UNU, and I was now moved to the UN Institute for Global Health in Malaysia. At the end of my assignment in Japan, so still with UNU, but to another institute. So I worked in Malaysia at the UN Institute for Global Health for another 6 years, and then finished in 2019. So I went back to Canada, to my university, and then COVID hit, and so we dealt with it. 2 years of complete lockdown, and it hit the Western countries more than it hit Africa. So everything, we lived like prisoners for those 2 years, and then in just in 2024, I was appointed to this UNESCO job, the UNESCO Mahatma Gandhi Institute of Education for Peace and Sustainable Development in New Delhi. So it's one of the one of the 8 UNESCO Category 1 institutes. Again, they are located in different countries, but this one, is located in India because India actually put in some money, to help UNESCO to establish it. So that's what I'm doing now, working on education for peace, but also the SDGs connect all of this. So health, education, sustainability, they're all all connected.
Okay, thank you. That's a rich resume, you would say, for one Ambra, uh, and this narrative differs from what we see when we think that every Nigerian who is outside our shores is actually doing something that's negative. So it's actually gratifying to know that there are men and women like you who are making our country and our continent proud, doing things that are globally recognized and globally rewarded. Okay, you just talked about international health regulations. Um, Maybe provide part of the legal frameworks. Given your role in revising the World Health Organization international health regulations, how can African nations better leverage these regulations to protect their borders without crippling local trade?
Yes, I mean that's really what the IHR tries to do. It tries to do the balance. Actually, if you look at the first article in the international health regulations, it talks about the need to balance the international movement of goods and services and people as well,
Okay.
without jeopardizing trade. Okay, so you have to maintain that fine balance. And the reason why you have that provision, the IHR itself is something that is one of the oldest set of regulations. It actually predated the UN. It was something that the European countries put together in the mid 19th century. When there was very stringent quarantine regulations, and during the following the Industrial Revolution, and the fact that the rise in maritime navigation and commerce. So a lot of there was a lot of vessel movement, maritime trade between England at that time and parts of Asia. So but before you can do that, you have to cross the Italian city-states, for instance. And it's not the Italy we know today. There are about 15 or different city-states. So each of them had their own quarantine regulations. So you could imagine what an ocean-going vessel goes through. You can be 10 for 30 days, in each of these states. So it was actually impeding, trade. So that was the motivating factor, So they got together around 1861, 11 European countries to negotiate what they call at that time the International Sanitary Convention. So over time, before the end of that century, there were a series of, and at that time, African states were not yet, independent. But so that's the origin. Then at the time of the League of Nations, 1918, 1919, they had, there was a sanitary office for the European countries. Then the Americas, countries of the Americas had what they called the Pan-American Sanitary Bureau in Washington, D.C., taking care of Canada, U.S., and the Brazil, and the southern the American states. So then there was the Health Office of the League of Nations. So there were 3 major, but somehow the international health regulations had transformed, each time, and then when we got to the UN, all of these things were got smashed, and subsumed under within the World Health Organization. So that's the historical background. Coming to the question that you raised, there are a whole lot of problems when there is a suspicion of disease outbreak, okay, not even confirmed. What countries do is to put in place this, very stringent measures, okay, quarantines, travel advisories, all kinds of things at the airports, back and this. So I'll give you 2 examples. There was a time that Peru had a cholera outbreak. So what the US did, and most of the European countries, was to embargo goods coming from Korea, coming from Peru, okay? Complete embargo, okay? There are so many other examples of this. So overreaction, because there's no scientific correlation between the fact that there's cholera in Peru and goods coming from that, so that's one part of it. The other part is also travelers coming from those places. You might have cholera in Enugu. Anyway, I live in Lagos, and I travel from Lagos to and I'm detained at the airport because I'm coming from Nigeria. Okay, so these are the kinds of excessive measures that the international health regulations, sought to. So it really wanted to put WHO at the center to coordinate all of this. And it works somehow. It works in some instances. So there are you are right. There are so many of these examples of situations as a big threat. An African country hits the most. Okay, we'll come to that maybe.
Okay, but
so there was one example.
Okay.
Outbreak of cholera in East Africa around like Victoria, basin, led the entire European Union, the EU, not just one country, to embargo fresh fish from Kenya, Mozambique, some countries around there. And this took time because everybody said, look, you don't have, there's no, even on the international trade rules, you can't do that. Because there's something that is called the SPS agreement, the Sanitary and Phytosanitary Measures Agreement for WTO. And what it says there is that before you put those kind of embargoes, you have to show scientific evidence, okay? And in this case, you got it wrong because there's no scientific, correlation between that cholera outbreak and fresh fish export from East Africa. But before you could challenge it, these countries are suffering, okay? Yes. They're losing money, Uganda, Kenya, Mozambique, there are about 4 of them. So these are some of the examples.
Prof, our focus is actually on Sub-Saharan Africa.
Yes.
And so when you have a look at Sub-Saharan Africa, what do we see? We actually see recurring challenges, pandemics, weak health infrastructure, medical brain drain, and dependency on foreign aid. My question would be double-fold. 1, how has globalization shaped Africa's vulnerability to health crises like COVID-19, Ebola, and Lassa fever?
Yes.
And 2, is Africa truly part of global health decision making, or merely a recipient of decisions made elsewhere?
Okay, those are two very important questions, and the second one is more political, it's more politics. But the first one about how is Africa part of the global health governance policies? The answer is yes and no. Okay, and I said this because health is part of foreign policy. Okay, it's very much, we have what we call global health diplomacy. Now, part of the part of the issues raised by your question is governance issues. Okay, Sub-Saharan Africa, we know what has been happening. Okay, in terms of putting in place the good governance mechanisms, starting with the obvious things, the basic things. Conduct elections. Okay, just do elections that are credible. It doesn't. So I put one question before I get into the global health part of it. Okay. When you're in a village, okay, you are in your village, you go to extended family meeting, and there are 2 people running for chairmanship of the district. And you call for raising of hands, there is people raise hands, they vote, you count. This guy has 40, this guy has 30. There's no dispute because everybody knows who lost. And then the life goes on. It happens in so many other informal settings. So, but when you look at what is happening in most places in Africa, we are, why can't we conduct simple elections? That's the question. I'll give you an example now. Look, if I lost the election as a village chairman or whatever, and I know the thing is transparent, why would I make noise? You just go and do. So the reason why these things are happening is that I would at 80% of African governments, I don't know, this can be contested, but I'm just saying there's some aspects of illegitimacy, okay, in the way that they came to power and all of that. So let's pack that one by the side. Then the question is, can you really have development, okay, and peace. Peace. Not Peace, not meaning that's what I do now in my institute. Not the absence of war or conflict,
yes,
but real peace. Can you have this when there's illegitimate governments in place? And when the government is legitimate, that's when corruption is not tackled. That's when favoritism. That's when all of these things are there. We know that it's happening. Okay, if you come to Nigeria now and you tell people, "Oh, Nigeria is serious about fighting corruption," people will laugh at you because they know they know you are not. So we put these things in place. Actually, the African governments where the level of governance is high, and I can give examples, countries like Namibia, Botswana to some extent, so there's quite a good number of them. You find that look, all of this, they're able to actually pursue, credible policies on sustainable development. So the question you raised about, whether globalization, is serving Africa's interests, and I started by asking that question by saying that look, health is part of foreign policy, and foreign policy is about interests. If you don't articulate your interest, who will do it for you? Okay, nobody. Does anybody love Africa more than Africans? Europeans. We know what they did during colonial, and now in this era of post, colonial and imperialistic, paradigms, they're happy, to see Africa where it is. Look at what is happening in DRC, for 5 decades. Look at Sudan. These are situations, conflicts that are forgotten, basically forgotten by the international community. Okay, so we need to put our house in order. Post COVID, again, crisis mode. Something happens. Ebola was a learning curve for us. What happened was despicable because it was the first time that we saw a situation where WHO completely failed. Okay, I'm talking about not the DRC Ebola, but the 3 West African countries, because something was happening. Everybody knew. International NGOs like Medecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders, they were there. They had all the evidence. They had all the facts and figures. WHO arrived very late, too late in the day. Okay, and by then people were dying. So it was so that's why it was just a lesson. That's a bitter lesson for African governments. And when you look at those 3 African countries, these are least developed countries: Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Guinea. Post-conflict, okay, the 3 of them, they share this post-conflict, very weak health infrastructure. So they needed help. Okay, they needed some form of assistance. So the world failed them. Okay, and you find that Doctors Without Borders were there. They did more work there than a UN agency, a UN health agency. And there's a lot of fallouts. If you look at that, was the very first time that the UN Secretary General openly criticized in a press conference, criticized a UN, specialized agency, for that, And we know what happened internally at WHO. We knew, so we thought we'd gotten over it, and then Ebola, COVID-19. So the COVID was more like the politics of vaccines. Okay, the fact that yes, those vaccines, there were some issues, there were a lot of conspiracy theories. Don't take them; they are not safe. It is a Western destined to depopulate Africa. If you take it, you become, for a woman, you may become, you lose their fertility. So there were all kinds of things that were said, but I was in Canada then, and I followed. Of course, I served on the WHO Director General's expert panel after COVID, to advise him on how to revise the international health regulations. So the point is, when it comes to that, there's a lot of politicization that is going on. Okay, science, we are taught, is universal language, and I make this joke all the time. If you are in primary school in your village, 1 + 1 is 2. If you're in primary school in Washington DC, 1 + 1 is 2. If you're in primary school in Brazil, 1 + 1 is 2. That's universal language. That's mathematics. Okay, so when it comes to so I was thinking that if science is a universal language, okay, we should speak one voice. So what should happen is that when these vaccines came out, okay, there's supposed to be an international scientific, verification of the efficacy. Nobody's saying no. There's no vaccine that is 100% efficient. Okay, even the ones that are used for children that are established for whooping cough, for tetanus, all of these things, you might give it to a certain kid, the reaction,
Yeah.
So that's the. But the thing is that what is fueling the suspicion is that the speed at which these vaccines, the COVID vaccines, were made. Okay, normally it takes maybe about almost 2 years. That should be the thing. But these ones came out, within. And people were saying, look, we're not so sure about. We're not so sure about. We're not sure about this. But I'm dealing with a crisis. Okay, people were dying in massive numbers. So it's got to be. But the point I'm making is that I expect a situation where, Africa is not prepared. Okay, we were just saved. God saved us. Let me put it that way from COVID. Because when I see what happened in the West,
yes, and what happened?
The level of death, in Canada, US, Europe,